So let's get started. More people may join us as we know these things sort of come in and out. If you are able to mute yourself, if you're not speaking, I can probably go and unmute people, but it's easier if you mute yourselves, just to stop echoes and things with the wonderful, yes, modern day seances. So, yeah, welcome to the first of the Crimson Coven collective chats. We've got a wealth of experience and people who are part of the group and part of my network, and I would like very much and have started to sort of reach out to people to come and have conversations about things within their area of expertise, because while obviously I have written the book and I have like background in things and much experience, everyone else has experience and expertise that and different perspectives, so it's really lovely to have that come in and offer more of that support to everyone. So that's kind of what these are for. And I'm experimenting with the technology to try and work out what's going to be the best way of doing it. So we're trying it this way this time. It might be slightly different next time. So thank you for your patience with me while we work out what the best way of doing this kind of community thing is. So as you know, I'm Halo Quin. I'm an author, a storyteller and a witch, and that's enough of an introduction for me. And today joining me is the inimitable Raven Edgewalker, who is a very dear friend of mine, who I've known for a very long time at this point. And I have a bio, so I'm going to read this to you. Yeah, which I always find cringy when I'm on the other side of it, but it's quite useful for people to hear the background. So I think it's beautiful, so I'm just going to read the whole thing. Raven Edgewalker is a British witch, teacher, artist and writer who dwells in the magical landscape of Somerset, UK. They are a Reclaiming and Feri initiate and have worked within both traditions for around 25 years, which is about as long as I've been doing magic, full stop. They have an ongoing passionate love affair with the natural world, its physical and non-physical spirits. Raven sees their work in the world as that of building relationship with self, with each other, within community, with deity and land and its beings. Raven has been lucky enough to teach reclaiming witch camps and workshops across the world, both face-to-face and online, as a founder and member of the teaching faculty of Worldtree Lyceum, which is a pagan mystery school. Well worth checking out. And I'll share links to that in the description to the recording at the end. Raven also owns the popular pagan business Green Woman Crafts and makes their living crafting beautiful pagan tools and jewellery, and I can confirm that they are beautiful. Also one of the few people I've encountered who makes OM sets with each of the individual woods, ethically sourced. So that sort of gives you an idea of some of the things that you can find. So the reason I've invited Raven to chat today is because within Reclaiming there is a tool and that has come from Feri called the Iron Pentacle, and this particular tool has influenced my work within the Crimson Craft a lot. So as we talk about it, you'll be able to see where that influence and that connection has come in. If you've got any familiarity with my work and with what I've been talking about. But it's always nice to start to bring these threads to the surface and make it a bit more explicit. So I would like to invite Raven to, if there's anything you'd like to add about yourself and about your background, and then to tell us just a little bit about what the Iron Pentacle actually is.
Thank you for that introduction. And yes, you know, I do tend to cringe whenever anyone introduces me still, but thank you for that, Halo. And it's lovely to be here, and it's lovely to have people to talk to, though Halo and I can quite happily rabbit on for days and have done in the past. So I was one of the really lucky people who managed to get to see Crimson Craft before it was published, and about a year ago, I think, just over a year ago now. And it's a fantastic resource, because I don't think sex and being sexual and just what sex is beyond what we do in the privacy of our own rooms with our own bodies or with partners' bodies is really talked about a lot. Even in traditions like paganism, witchcraft, where we're supposed to be sex positive, right? So Halo has invited me to ramble and chat and maybe have conversation, because I can pontificate at length about the Iron Pentacle. So the Iron Pentacle is a tool that came out of Anderson Feri, probably 1970s, 60s, 70s, but was created / channeled / inspired by a guy called Victor Anderson in California, who was the first Grand Master, which sounds awfully grand, doesn't it? And patriarchal and power over. And he created this amazing tool called the Iron Pentacle. And if you imagine you are lying on the floor, with your arms stretched out, or you are standing in the position of a star with your arms out and your legs out, depending on how many of us can hold our arms out at length. Or if you imagine the sort of Leonardo da Vinci's drawing of the man, in the circle as a star, and you imagine, so we have the 5 points of our body, which map onto the 5 points of the pentacle. And the Iron Pentacle, each point is named for a quality. And everything starts in the universe with sex. We'll talk a bit about, Halo and I will chat a bit about what sex can mean, and what, in all the myriad ways in a moment or two. And we move down to our bodies, to our right foot. And that point on the Iron Pentacle is pride. So we go sex to pride in our right foot. I'm not going to stick my right foot in the screen. Sorry, I'm not that athletic anymore. To our left hand, and that point is self. And we move across our bodies to our right hand. So sex, pride, self, power. So we hold power in our right hand. And then the 5th point of the pentacle is passion in our left foot. If you think about it, as a model, rather than, oh, well, yeah, sure, I always must keep sex in my head and power in my right hand. But this is a model to help us understand how the points connect up. And if you stop and think about it, sex, pride, self, power, passion, in our modern world of patriarchal overculture, of capitalism, so many of these words, all 5 of these words, have those sort of ouch, sort of, oh, am I allowed to be sexy? Am I allowed to be selfish? Oh, we talk about pride going before a fall. Passion, well, particularly female-bodied people, you shouldn't be too passionate about anything. So we talk about these points as a way of reclaiming, and we talk about them as our birthright. And we also talk about the points of the Iron Pentacle and the tool of the Iron Pentacle as being the work of a lifetime. This isn't something that we can go to a workshop on for a weekend and go, oh, right, yeah, I fixed all my relationships with all those points. Or do you reckon we could do it, Halo?
Yeah, I think we could do it. We could do it. We could do that in a weekend. Absolutely. No. We could make a good start, though.
We can. So what we can do in a weekend or a short talk is begin to sort of talk about these qualities and how they connect up, and and begin to reclaim or shift our relationship with these things that we believe in, both Anderson Feri and Reclaiming, and also in the Morning Star tradition. that these are our birthrights and we deserve them. They are ours, and nobody should be trying to take them away from us. Nobody should be trying to say, no, you shouldn't be selfish. No, we can be we can love ourselves. No, you shouldn't be sexy. Fuck that. So we always talk about, we start with sex in our heads. Sure, sex doesn't live in our heads, but we start with that first point, because everything starts and ends with sex, whether we're human beings, whether we are amoeba, whether we are the universe exploding into being, the Big Bang Theory. There is some form of explosion of energy, of perhaps exchange of matter. That is sex.
There's a really interesting point in there. May I feed him?
Please.
So talking about the
Nobody
points
wants
of the
me to hear. Nobody wants to sit and hear me talk for an hour.
I don't know. I quite enjoy listening to you talk. So there's this piece in there about, like you said, sex doesn't live in our heads. Well, yes, and there's that kind of that point of who is it that says it's all in our head, and our heads are bigger than we think they are. Like, our experience of everything, we kind of knit it together at that point. And then through our because our heads are part of our body.
Yeah.
So it's that point at which it all kind of, we conceptualize things. And when we start talking about some of these things, and we start talking about things like sex positivity and being sexy, and we start talking about the concepts, we often start connecting with them on an intellectual level before, and a story level, before we sort of really start to allow ourselves to feel it in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that interesting dynamic there of how important our minds are in this very embodied, energetic and tangible thing. And all 5 points fit that.
Oh yeah.
That piece.
And I think it's yes, and for some of us, we do want. For some of us, our immediate go-to is, well, brains are sexy, and and I want to start thinking about things in my head first. And for some of us, we start, experiencing it and feeling it in our bodies first before. So, but regardless, I love this imagery. Everything starts and ends with sex. But what is sex, and what are we talking about when we're talking about sex? And for some of us, yeah, I mean, we can have the most amazing sexual experiences and never leave our heads.
And
but
that's,
go on, keep going.
and that's something that you said in there about like, we are allowed to be sexy, and what is being sexy.
Yeah.
Because there's that external, and this is part of the thing that we're reclaiming, is there's this external idea and concept of, like, if you're being sex positive, if you're being engaged, if you're being a sexual being, there's this idea that that has to look a particular way, and that isn't actually true.
No. And I think, when we're starting to talk about sex magic, being sexy, even the sex point of the Iron Pentacle, I've had folk who say, oh, I can't work with the sex point of the Iron Pentacle because I don't want to have sex. I'm not interested in having sex. I'm asexual. I'm celibate. I'm, all I do is, on my own, or I have many partners. We have this huge spectrum of where we land on this. And I think particularly female-bodied people, we have had so many projections of what it should be to be sexy in the eyes of the world, that, I think this point and this work, really, forget the rest of the points of the Iron Pentacle. Sometimes I think, like, no, fuck, this is the point that we need to begin, could be the work of all of our lifetimes to explore what exactly does it mean, and how can we be sexual beings in right relationship with each other. One of the ways we sometimes shift the focus on, you know, sex and intercourse and what pop culture thinks is sex is by reframing sex as life force. And how do we work with, and how does life force flow through us?
And that's one of the reasons that within the Crimson Craft I talk about the energy of Eros, of the divine erotic, because that point at which we feel most embodied and most alive is very, very, very similar to that. In fact, the physiological side of it is very, very similar to sexual arousal. And the reason for that is because we are embodied beings, and that, like, those experiences are part of the same thing. It's being engaged, it's being open to experiencing the world, etc. Now, that doesn't mean that when we're excited about being alive, we want to be having intercourse by any means. But there are these connections there. And we're not reducing everything down. This is expanding things out and expanding our, okay, let's look at this in a holistic perspective, and rather than trying to divide any one thing away from everything else, hold it in a, okay, how is this a part of being alive? So yes, life force, and the energy of Eros, the that engagement, embodied love.
Yes, and I think that's exactly it. I think what we're trying, you know, what we're talking about and where we're stretching to is that, you know, physical sex and how we can be move in the world, you know, in our worlds that we as individuals might consider being sexual beings, is a piece of understanding this web of interconnection, this life force that naming it as sex is a piece of, but not necessarily the whole of. And it varies from person to person. And it varies, you know, from day to day, and how we want to engage with this life force, with, you know, in situation with different people, you know, when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, you know, can I get, you know, I might want to go out and, you know, just sit and tap into life force and lean against a tree. Or, you know, I might want to, you know, engage in the act of intercourse with a partner. I probably don't want to do both every day.
Oh.
Other people might. Other people might want to do it more, you know, many times a day. But we're all individual, and part of reclaiming this energy of sex and life force is figuring out what rocks our world and how to connect into that energy of Eros, that energy of sex that's ours and not influenced by, you know, however many years that each of us have been on the planet, the messages that we've had that, oh no, you know, this is the way you should be doing it, you should be doing it, you're wrong. I chat with, you know, I have a couple of friends who are asexual in different ways, and you know, the number of times they are put in a position of saying, no, it's not that I, you know, I don't have any issues, never had any issues, I'm really lucky, I didn't actually have any issues with bad relationships, with abuse or anything. I just don't really, you know, doesn't rock my world. And then, you know, and the number of times they are in a position of having to have those conversations and say, no, you know, this is who I am. And then, you know, in the world of witchcraft, defending themselves and saying, no, I can absolutely function as a priest or a priestess and run energy and be engaged in life force and love and be loved, but this is who I am. And I think it's so, I mean, I find it fascinating sharing, you know, talking about differences and how can we can all engage in this work in our own way. and, you know, reel myself back from a bit of a tangent.
But like there's this interesting thing. So one of the reasons I like the term Eros is because it's from the Greek language. It's one of the words for love, and it's love as passionate sexual, like that's desirous. So it's an embodied love that is reaching out for connection and pleasure, and like that, bringing it back to that point of actually underlying everything. We've got the different ways in which this energy, this life force, universal love, whatever you want to call it, like manifests through in our relationships and our interactions. And that, so Barbara Carrellas is a fabulous author who most famous for urban tantra, but her other book that I have and really rate is called Ecstasy is Necessary. And in it she actually talks about ecstatic experiences and going, let's not reduce it just to sexual orgasmic things. Let's look at this, and we know this within reclaiming, in particular within when you've circled in group ritual, or if you've done solo trance work and you've gotten into a point where you're hitting those ecstatic states. It's that expansive, connected, like beyond limits experience that feels, I mean, for me, the way I come back to describing it is feeling fully alive and unlimited. We are
Mm-hmm.
bigger than how we perceive ourselves in our day-to-day spaces, and we remember then that ecstatic connection. So that is the point at which the love is embodied, when we feel that ecstatic experience in our bodies. And I count myself as very lucky, because I'm incredibly sensitive, and have a tendency. I don't know if this is a natural tendency or if this is because I've cultivated it, towards pleasure. And in conversations with other people, I'm aware that it seems to not be quite so noticeable for other people. But once we relax into, and everyone starts to relax into that connection and feel safe, that capacity for pleasure and connection, and the energy, the flow of energy, which is then a connection to our power within, because it's rooting into that universal life force, that love that runs through everything, and then embodying it. There is that point at which our body goes, oh, this feels good. And that, I think, is why we talk about life force as sex, because it's that point at which it feels good, and it's that drive towards life, which
Mm-hmm.
is present within the drive towards survival, in the sort of instincts, the drive towards pleasure within the interactions, the connections, intercourse, all of those different layers. It's this huge thing that when we reduce it down into wearing pretty underwear, as that's being sexual, it's like, well, you can wear pretty underwear if you want, if that feels good and feels alive to you. But that isn't all it is.
No. And, you know, and it's not all airbrush models. It's not wearing, you know, it's, you know, not our ideal form of, you know, whatever, you know, terrible porn is on late night that, you know, sort of watch as a young teenager. I think, whoa, is right. No, it's, you know, it's more, and or it can be more, but so many of the problems that we have are because society has reduced it down to this, you know, this sort of embarrassing, naughty thing, you know, full of sin from the Christian church, full of, you know, pressure from our peers as teenagers to, oh well, you know, oh, you're too old for that, or, you know, my mother telling me when I was in my mid-30s and breaking up with a partner, oh, well, you know, you've had it now, darling. You're never going to find anyone else. And I'm like, Mom, I'm in my 30s. Don't tell me this. You know, like, this is ridiculous. She's like, oh, well, you know, you're on the shelf. You know, something. So, you know, we have we have so many hang-ups even around talking about, you know, sex and what it is, and, you know, and exploring it on our, you know, what makes us feel sexy on our own. So, you know, there's, you know, some homework or thinking to do from, you know, hey, like, you know, what makes you feel sexy, connected, full of the energy of Eros, whether it is sexy underwear or whether it's you know, a really good hot water bottle, you know, whether it is going and standing in the, you know, the middle of a field and screaming, whether it's taking a moment of stillness and imagining growing roots down into the earth and connecting with the center of the earth, and imagine growing branches up into the sky and feeling energy flowing through you from the depths of the earth into your body and up into the sky, and spending, you know, and taking some breaths and breathing into what it feels like to be connected on that level, to remind ourselves, what does it mean to be a child of the earth? And our earth has this incredible molten iron rich core, and we're humans. We have iron flowing through our bodies in our blood. And above us, once upon a time, the universe came into existence with a big bang, creating all these stars with iron-rich cores. You know, once upon a time, we were a star. How does it feel to breathe into that and hold that connection? And perhaps going back and remembering that iron and the birth of the universe and that incredible ecstasy may help bring us back to, well, what does it mean to be a human and to be a sexy, sexual being connected to Eros now?
And there's that saying, isn't it? Confidence is sexy. That's like actually that embodiment, being in our bodies and being connected and present, is one of the most beautiful, alive, and therefore sexy things we can do. And this again isn't about being sexy for someone else. This is about feeling that connection and that aliveness for ourselves.
And I think that's a really good way of framing it as well. You know, well, well, what does it, you know, what do I need to do to feel sexy within myself? Well, okay, roll that back. What do I need to do to feel connected? You know, is there, some of my, you know, the thing that I do most often when I want to feel connected to someone or something is go hug the dog. All right. So tactile, warm, connected to another being. Okay, can I breathe and expand that into the next step? So that feeling of being connected, that makes me feel good. Well, okay, so maybe I can expand that a little bit more and be connected and present in my room, in my space, in my workspace. So what do we need to feel connected? What do we need to feel alive? What do we need to feel to be in relationship with ourselves? Forget other people right now. Though don't forget the dogs and the cats, because they'll need their dinner soon.
Don't say the D word. That's almost as bad as the W word.
Well, no, he's fast asleep, so his ears flicked, but I think I'm safe. So, you know, there's so much of this work of reclaiming sex as a word that we can actually understand, that's got something to do with us, because you know, well, this is a word I can apply to myself in some way, shape or form. I can reclaim it. I can reclaim that first point of the Iron Pentacle in some way I can say sex to myself, or I can say, you know, I may not feel sexy now, I may not felt sexy for a good long while, but I can begin to think about what it might mean. And I think sometimes that, well, that hypothetical, you know, we're coming back to our heads, that gameplay of, well, I can't feel it now, but what if I could imagine what it might be like?
Because that feeling sexy is feeling good in yourself. Ultimately, that's actually all that word means. It's feeling at home in yourself and feeling that pleasure is accessible. And reclaiming that away from feeling like you appeal to other people is a really important piece. Bringing it back to, as you say, that for myself rather than for others. And the funny thing about that is, of course, that once you reclaim that, then actually the other people in your life who appreciate you will very likely start to recognize that and be attracted to it. And I don't just mean in a relationship way. There's a thing, if you look at a performer on stage, and I think Florence of Florence and the Machines is a really good example of this. That she, especially in some of her earlier shows, but even so, I've seen some of the clips recently on Instagram, and basically she is present, open, allowing the energy, the life force, the music to flow through her. And in the early shows, I saw a recording of her at Glastonbury, and she is bouncing across the stage. She is so vibrant and so alive and so present in herself. And the audience can't help but watch. I couldn't help but watch, and it was over a recording. And now you see clips of her on Instagram. And she stood at the edge of the stage, and her audience are there reaching up to her and like almost in tears of ecstasy at this. It's like they're seeing a piece of the divine present and embodied, as though she is a priestess carrying the goddess, though I'm not sure whether or not she'd use that language. And her audience respond to it. So it's this thing of, once we are present in ourselves, regardless of attracting a partner in that traditional sense, the world sees that and responds to it. And that can actually be quite scary.
Yeah. But I think that there is also a piece of information in there around, you know, so, you know, who are we attracted to? And I don't just mean sexually, but, you know, who are the people that who we perceive as strong in our lives? You know, what do they have? How do they act? How do they carry themselves? And sometimes that can help give us clues about, well, you know, I love the way, you know, she stands. Well, sometimes shifting our posture. Raven says, my posture generally sucks, especially since I'm sitting on a fairly crappy sofa. But, you know, sometimes, you know, changing our posture, noticing how someone walks, that, you know, oh yeah, I mean, they look really confident to me. Can you model that in yourself, in your own body? Oh, I really like that thing that they're wearing. I wonder what that thing would look like on me. And sometimes helping to shape shift what and play can help us also connect. And sometimes it can be, oh right, yeah, it really worked well for them, but I'm never wearing yellow ever again. But yeah, you know, but playing, you know, can help us you know, begin to get some of this information that we need to, you know, well, what does it mean to claim, to reclaim, to deepen into our relationship with sex, with Eros, with this, you know, this point of the Iron Pentacle and its energy that we talk about. You know, so you know, explore different ways and we don't, I think it's important to remember, yes, we are doing this work for ourselves, but we do not have to necessarily do this work on our own. And part of being in, being in groups, in some form of community, even the joys of social media, this, it has its negative side, means that sometimes you can reach out and, hey, I could use a hug today, or get some, I'm really struggling with this, do you have some ideas? And we can do this work in relationships with other people to support us while we are doing the work for ourselves and exploring that. And that doesn't mean asking someone else to tell you what to do, because sure, we have tools, we have books like Crimson Craft, we have tools like Iron Pentacle, and there is at least, there's 2 books written on Iron Pentacle at this point in time. There are.
I know one. I have one on my shelf right here. I'm just trying to think what the other one is.
Tony Rella, out of Morningstar.
Ah, okay.
So I think, I can't remember what I know. Is it called Circling the Star?
Oh, yeah, I have heard of that. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it. Is it one you would recommend? Have you read it?
Yeah, I think it's I've read it. It's just someone else's different perspective on working with Iron Pentacle. So it's and both the Iron Pentacle books, like sort of the other book is written by Jen Meredith and Geddy Palmer, or is it
Geddy Palmer? The Magic of the Iron Pentacle. I know that's so reversed. I apologise.
So there's a couple of books, and there are folk like myself who also teach Iron Pentacle work, and there is Halo is creating this amazing resource online for folk to dip in, to explore, to play, to learn more about tools that we can then use in our own lives. And an Iron Pentacle is only one of them, and sex is only one point thereof, the Iron Pentacle.
And what's wonderful and fun and is how actually that connects up and informs all the other points. So that point of life force, of sex, of embodied love that we start with, that point there, which I believe interestingly in Spiral Dance by Starhawk, in the later editions, she actually renames that point Desire, which I disagree with, but it's a really interesting, just an additional bit of information to add in, that it's definitely a part of that. And then how that informs, like when we're connected to that, how do we stand in with pride in ourselves, healthy pride in ourselves, going, I know who I am, and I honor that, and I acknowledge my strengths, and recognize where my limits are, and go, well, that's okay, actually, which then allows us to honor other people's strengths. How it informs our sense of self when we are embodied, when we are connected, like how that life force then informs who we know ourselves to be, and how who we know ourselves to be is expressed in the way that we connect and desire, and how that manifests in the power that rises from within when we're connected, and how we communicate and share things through our passion, how that goes out into the world and comes back. And the other piece of the Iron Pentacle, which we won't go into at this point, is the Pearl Pentacle, where sex is described and manifests as the flip side of love. And the Pearl Pentacle is the concepts and the pieces, the energy of the Iron Pentacle, then expressed through community, but also within ourselves. So there's this really nuanced and fascinating web of connections that all work together to support us in the work that we do. So yeah, it's, as you say, just one tool, but it's a very powerful one.
Oh, it's an incredibly potent tool, and I think it I find it so useful as a model for exploring, as I think earlier, these other points and how they are in relationship to me, and how when I feel that I've got all the points lined up like cute little ducks, how I can be more right sized and more, I think it's becoming slightly a bit of a catchphrase in the moment, but how can I be more authentic and present in my everyday life and in my relationships if I can actually ignore, claim these potent ideas or qualities.
You said right sized there. There's a really interesting reframe that you gave me, actually. So I've often been described as being too big,
Mm-hmm.
too boisterous. I take up a lot of space. When I'm happy and I'm comfortable in a space, I get excited and I take up a lot of space. And I'm constantly trying to I was constantly trying to make myself smaller so that I fit in that space and didn't squash other people. And there was this reframe that you gave to me, which was about volume. I can be as big as I want and just turn down the volume on the expression. And you've just reminded me of it. And it's like, I'll be the size that I am, and I'll be authentically me. And I'll just turn down or up the volume depending on what's appropriate, so that I'm not
Yeah.
speaking over other people and so that I'm still being heard where I've got expertise. So there's that really interesting thing, which I thought I'd just sort of share, in case that's a useful piece
Yeah.
for people.
Because I think the tendency when we start reclaiming all these points is to get is to become very big and well, and the sort of we can be a bit awkward, let's face it. Sometimes we can be a bit awkward because we're exploring, oh wow, this is really cool, I'm wearing this wonderful new pair of moon boots that I absolutely love. Oh whoops, I accidentally stopped on someone's toe. So I mean, so yes, we get to be who we are, but we don't we do need to, we also still need to be in relationship with other people. And I think that's, it was a smart metaphor, wasn't it? You can turn the volume down a little bit.
Yeah, and turn it up when
I've
they need
forgotten
to.
that.
Yeah, yes, have it back. Please continue to use it because that was so helpful to me. And there's also that thing, like going back to that, if wearing cute underwear makes you feel sexy, makes you feel good in yourself and connected to yourself, feel free to wear it. You might want to put something else on over the top if you're walking down the street. Um, and again, there's that where is it appropriate to do these things? How do we connect in with these things in ourselves and find these things in ourselves? And how do we communicate them in the world in a way that is appropriate and safe? Um, and it's a really interesting line and space to be in and to explore. And there are some spaces where you can be bigger and wear different things that you wouldn't normally and try things on, and it's a safe space to do that. And in other spaces, like perhaps if you're going to church with your dear granny, like you might want to sort of filter that with some respect for that space and go, actually, okay, this is where you're at and where I am. um I'm sure we're all here aware of that, but it always bears mentioning, because the flip side, I think, the pushback against the restrictions that a lot of us have had, against the things like the points of the Iron Pentacle, against being sexy. One of the ways in which people have pushed back against that being oppressed and repressed is by going, well, okay, I'm going to throw it in everyone's faces, and pushing ourselves further. So like people who, for example, like asexual friends who have felt like, in order to push back against the repression around it, they've pushed themselves to have sex in ways that they don't want to. So I think we've probably all been in experiences where we've pushed ourselves to do things in ways that don't necessarily align with us. And part of that means that we find where our boundaries are, and part of that is pushing back against those limits. But so it's sort of that learning that discernment of what is authentic for us, what is right for us. I have friends who do orgies on a regular basis, and when I am around them, I make my boundaries very clear of I do not want to be in that space. I'll go and be in the other room and hold a clothed space for people who want to break. It's working out what's good for us, and allowing what's good for other people, and then finding that meeting point.
So just because my boundaries have changed doesn't mean that anyone else's around me's boundaries have to change as well to accommodate me. And that is part of being right-sized as well.
Yeah.
What is the size of my container, and where am I at in the moment, and that can shift and change, but I can't necessarily expect anyone else to shift and change.
Yeah.
So
whether that's granny or
so I'm just going to say, Halo and I've rambled for a while. Does anyone have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions before I turn the recording off? Okay. Feel free to pop things in the chat if you don't want to speak. What we'll do is we'll sort of wrap up. Hello to new person who has just appeared. We'll wrap up the official thing. I'll turn off the recording, and then we've still got like another 10-15 minutes depending on Raven's puppy dog waking up or not and needing a walk, to have a conversation, have any questions or anything. So thank you very much, Raven. Thank you to everyone who has turned up, and to everyone that's listening to this on the recording. It's an interesting, you've probably got an interesting visual here, but I hope you've gotten a sense of what the space has been like as a kind of community space. Did you have anything you'd like to say before I turn off the recording, Raven?
No, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening, and
I will
Halo for hosting and recording this.
Thank you. I will put in the comments to the video a link to the World Tree Lyceum page, because actually Raven is going to be starting teaching a course on the Iron Pentacle, which has run many times, which is fabulous. And it's entirely Zoom free.
Yes.
So you run it and you get the material each week to work through in your own time, and a space to converse and ask questions and communicate as well. But you don't have to set aside a dedicated time to turn up on video camera. So I'll pop the link to that in the description, and any of the resources that we've mentioned, the books that I can remember.
Thank you, Halo. Yeah, yes, we're starting a 7-week class on Sunday.
Which sadly, I do highly recommend. Huh?
Sadly, our website is still down.
It's all right. I'll pop a link to the what's it called? The booking,
the Google
information.
Form.
Yeah. So thank you very much again, Raven, and thank you to everyone who's being a part of the Crimson Coven Collective. You are all very welcome, and let me know if there's anything that you particularly want to explore in the coming months, and we'll sort of engage with that and see what we can do to dive deeper into those spaces. I will be hosting a retreat on Sunday the 19th, so that's going to be a 3-hour-long retreat working with divine love and some of the principles with the Crimson Craft. I'll talk a bit more about that on the live stream next Thursday, so that if anyone wants to get in at the last minute they can, but I'll put up some information about that as well.